Should we be afraid of Europe? I think that the main answer to that is no in terms of legislation, because most of the legislation that we're doing in terms of financial services is by international agreement from the G20 and on banking from the Basel Committee. So we're just in Europe turning the handle on that, making it fit Europe, and quite often the UK government is saying that Europe is being too weak, and at the same time industry is saying we don't want the regulation. Well, actually that's pretty balanced. Most of the time we get it fixed and it works okay. So I don't think there's any cause to be afraid there. We've got this big issue coming up now of banking union, where the Eurozone will have the European Central Bank as the supervisor, and that means that when they're dealing with technical standards and issues like that within the European Banking Authority, the Eurozone countries are going to tend to think with one mind and vote with one mind, and so we have to adjust the arrangements so that there is fair voting and that isn't a sort of discrimination against non-Eurozone countries. We're working very hard to fix that. Long term, of course, it becomes a problem because everybody goes into the Eurozone. And so whatever the arrangements are that we organise for now that will work, progressively they will break down when you end up with only the UK and maybe Denmark on the outside. And there is no way that we could be given a veto over what they want to do in the Eurozone. And likewise, because of the problems of the financial crisis caused through what they consider was loose regulation in the UK, they're not going to allow us to sort of cut free and be loose again and still have access to the single market. So in terms of should we be afraid, well, we should be really afraid if we end up in a scenario where the UK is not in Europe and our financial services companies and banks don't have access to the single market on passports. We should be really afraid of that, but that's not something that necessarily we can deal with until we face the moment of an in-out referendum. Banking union might make that come sooner rather than later. If we're dealing with regulation, then I think that there's no reason to be afraid. If we end up just carping on the sidelines all the time and therefore not getting properly engaged, then we'll get results that don't work as well for us, and so that position is somewhere in between the two. But getting along as friends, rubbing along, actually exchanging properly about the differences, getting it technically right, we're actually pretty good at that, and so we shouldn't really be afraid.